Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast by Storm Sound, where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Zach Brock. Critically acclaimed as the pre-eminent improvising violinist of his generation, Zach is an American jazz violinist and multi-Grammy Award-winning member of Snarky Puppy. He has toured with Stanley, Clarke, and Phil Markowitz, released 7 solo albums, and was named Rising Star Violinist of 2013 by Downbeat Magazine. A passionate educator, Zach has coached hundreds of musicians from workshops to conservatories worldwide. Zach remains a perennial coffee fanatic and skateboard enthusiast, and currently lives with his wife and daughters in the NYC area. Zach, say hi.
Hi, how's it going, Ryan?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for being on today. I'm a huge fan, and I'm really excited to talk some Phish with you.
Sounds good.
So, before we get into the episode, I just want to say hi, everybody listening. Been a little while since we had one of these episodes. Very excited to be getting back into the swing of things with Phish content. Just to let you know, these will be out not as frequently as they used to be, but whenever there is an episode, there will be one out. So look forward to many more episodes of We Move Through Stormy Weather coming out. Also, if you didn't know already, Storm Sound, which is my brand new business, exists. Check it out at thisisstormsound.com. We've got an amazing merch store, lots of Phish and Goose related designs and other fun stuff. Also, you can find all of my concert reviews and whatnot there. So let's dive in without further ado. Zach, how did you get into Phish?
I got into Phish through an older brother of one of my best friends growing up. I had just gotten into playing guitar. I was really into Jimi Hendrix. I was really into Jimi Hendrix, especially at the time. My grandfather owned a music store. My grandparents had a music store in Lexington, Kentucky, where I grew up. And so, and my dad played, besides trumpet, my dad is a guitar player. And so there were guitars around the house, but I would go over to my grandfather's music store and get the electrics off the wall and get to mess around with effects and stuff. Anyway, that's sort of, I was getting into that. Mm-hmm. My friend's older brother was, obviously a better guitar player than I was. And I thought he was really cool. And he would, he introduced us to so many things besides Phish, Dead Kennedys, like a vast variety of things, especially Jimi Hendrix, a lot of psychedelic rock and stuff like that. So I got an LP, and this was back when LPs were not hip again, like they are now, but most people probably were wanting CDs. I guess LPs were never not hip, but it was sort of the end of the tape era. Right. This would have been the early 90s. I got an LP of Lawn Boy, and I had a record player, crappy little Fisher all-in-one stereo system that I had hooked up in my room, where I had my tape decks and my record player and my speakers pointed at my head so I could lay in bed. And this is how I first started listening to Phish. And I grew up playing classical music, grew up playing classical violin, singing in choirs, and was very much kind of coming out of that and folk music with my family. And I got into improvisation, playing in bands with my family and with my dad. And so there were things going on in that album. I guess we were sort of right at the beginning of the grunge era that sort of had, I guess that was in full swing at this time. This would have probably been about 1991. When did, when Lawn Boy came out? I don't
90.
know.
Lawn Boy came out in 90.
Okay, so this was probably 90 or 91. And I was just really inspired by some of the more compositional elements. I liked the fact that they were being weird, that they were obviously coming from some type of a counterculture gestalt.
Yeah. What was it like hearing that kind of the classical compositional influence that is in Phish songs like that? Like, what was it like from you coming from classical music, hearing songs like Split Open and Melt or Reba or Divided Sky for the first time?
Well, when I would hear stuff like that, it's stuff that it's very normal for me. It's very familiar, and so just sort of lights up more buttons in my brain probably than a lot of other stuff. I was also actually by that time I had gotten into Frank Zappa, so I was really into Zappa too, and in particular, not so much the Mothers of Invention, but especially One Size Fits All. That was my favorite, still kind of my favorite Zappa record, and that iteration of that band from the mid 70s, compositional rock and stuff like that, shredding guitar. That's what I loved. So, another thing that I really liked the Trey's guitar tone.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to me. It was very violin-like in a certain way. It was especially when he gets into the never-ending note sustain stuff, that first Languedoc guitar that he had. And I think that I probably responded to that. There was a lot of other guitar players that I hadn't heard. I hadn't really listened to a lot of Carlos Santana at the time, so I wasn't drawing any correlations in the tone. For me, it was just, who is this weird dude from Vermont, and these guys with these, almost sort of like reading John Lennon's poetry of sort of the nonsense, psychedelic, whatever you would call it, things with the lyrics. So for me, as a kid growing up in Lexington, Kentucky, it was a really cool record to have gotten from a cool older brother of a friend. And it really, really inspired me to find out more about them. And so that's where I started. And then, And then when was your first show? So I went to college in Chicago. Well, technically Evanston, which is where I met Drew Hitz. We both went to Northwestern, and pretty sure that got the record with Fee.
Yep. Junta.
Yeah. Junta. I don't know if I got that in Lexington before I left or if I got that up in Evanston, but that really drove me wild. I really, really loved that a lot. And I believe that my first Phish show was at this small-ish club in Chicago called The Vic. And I saw all kinds of bands at The Vic. I saw Phish. I saw Rollins Band.
Would it have been December 5th, 1992?
Probably.
There you go.
Is that one at The Vic?
They played 2 nights there in December 92.
That was it. There
you go.
I was a freshman in college. Yeah.
So what was that like, going from listening to the studio stuff to listening live? Because at that point, did you have any live tapes from the late 80s or early 90s? Or was this your first experience seeing or hearing live Phish?
What I remember, unless you were from Vermont or somebody that had been hearing them for a while, the taping scene was
not much at the time.
Yeah, it was very new. Yeah, it was just maybe a dude or a couple of dudes in the back of the room with some mics, and I mean, I didn't know that until we started trading tapes.
Right. Which was so. When did you start trading tapes? Was it right after this, or it took a while?
Yeah. It was. So of course, I started trading tapes as soon as I connected with other people my age, listening to music. So to me, that is the most important thing for me about my love of Phish. So because I am the age that I am. Born in the 70s, growing up in the 80s, I always had this very wistful idea about what it must have been like for my parents' generation growing up in the 60s, having a counterculture that was something separate from status quo of what was going on in the United States, and being able to connect with young people my age, being able to experiment with everything, being able to find out who you are, being able to still have fun, being able to extend the best parts of your childhood into the beginning of your adulthood. I think that this was what I was looking for. Yeah. And so I didn't know, of course, also, I mean, this was also before the internet, like wide use of the internet. I mean, I guess it existed, but nobody was using it because there was nothing on it. So couldn't see videos of shows. You couldn't see people. You couldn't see parking lots. You just had to go and experience that. So it was a massive shock in a great way for me to go to that first show and to see, oh my God, not only are there these people from Chicago going to see this show, but there's tons of people that came from out of town to also see the show.
Yeah, traveled from far away to see, this band.
Yeah, and we're all lined up in December in Chicago, freezing our asses off.
Oh man,
around the block. That just an experience like that is something that brings people together. So I remember the energy of the show being explosive. Also, I don't know if you can pull up the capacity of the Vic, but it's very small. For those of you that are Phish fans out there that are used to just seeing Phish at Madison Square Gardens or something like that. It's
only 1,000 capacity.
1,000, 1,000 capacity, packed. Anyway, I'm waxing.
Well, it's good
about this.
That's what we do here. It's a lot of long-winded rambling about Phish. That's the whole purpose of the podcast.
Cool.
I know you. So you wanted to talk about Bouncing Around the Room today. And while that's not a song that jams per se, or is very different from version to version, I'm interested to know why you want to talk about that song. What specifically resonates with you when you hear that?
I'm sorry to constantly switch all this up on you, because I know that I know when we had talked about it earlier, I was talking about Reba. Most of the songs that just hit me right off the bat, obviously, were on Lawn Boy. So I loved it when they would play Split Open and Melt or things like that, where they would jam out. I was thinking about Bouncing Around the Room because I thought that the layering, simple but effective layering and canonic things going on between the piano and the guitar and the melodies and everything like that, I just thought had a really lasting emotional impact.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious to know, you mentioned earlier violin and guitar. Were you a violin player first or a guitarist first?
Yeah, I started playing violin when I was 4, and I started playing guitar, messing around with the guitar, I should say. I don't know, maybe I was 12, something like that.
Right.
Just kind of messing around, learning my first 3 chords, learning how to bend a string.
I haven't made it that far. I play keys.
Cool.
And I know kind of your thing is violin with like guitar effects, which is a really, really, cool sound. And so do you, when did you start experimenting with that? Was it like you were messing around with a guitar and you were like, oh, what if I put my violin through this? Or was it like a purposeful, like you were like, I'm going to go and I'm going to, make a pedal board for my violin and start, playing around with that?
Definitely not going and making a pedal board, because I didn't even know what that was. And that was not even something that was so common back then. My grandfather stocked a few of the Boss effects. So they would have a chorus pedal in there. They had the metal zone. And I would mess around with them and have fun with them. And I don't think that I had an electric guitar. Well, eventually I borrowed one from the store, got the family discount. But yeah, it was just single effects, messing around and just trying to play stuff and Hendrix stuff and just learning how to play blues guitar, basically. But a couple of things happened. Number one, a guy that was playing in band with my dad at the time, a mandolin player, gave me his first mandolin that he made. It was kind of a beater, but he gave it to me. Mandolin is the same as the violin, except just with frets. It's the same pitches, same strings.
Yeah.
So that was fun to mess around with because I was learning how to pick right-hand guitar stuff, and the left-hand stuff in guitar, even though the strings are tuned differently, is at least single note wise very straightforward. So I got this mandolin and this little Barkus Berry pickup that was something that you would stick on the back of the wood of the instrument. It was just basically a contact mic type thing. And my grandfather, or actually it was usually my uncle. My uncle was the one that he was an electric bass player. And so he would get these things for other people coming to the store that were studying guitar and stuff like that. So there was this thing called, I'm going to get this wrong. You might have to fact check me on this, but
That's
it was
fine.
an Ibanez hot watt. Check this out. This is unbelievable. It was put in a plastic casing to make it look like a Walkman, because Walkmans were still a thing. So it was a plastic box that had a belt clip on it that you would clip on your belt. It had a 1/4 inch in and out. And then across the top, it had, I guess, a little gain knob, and it had just these buttons that you would turn on the chorus or turn on the reverb. Totally nuts. So,
sorry, it's the Orion Hot Watt.
Orion Hot Watt.
Orion with an A.
Oh, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, it's got echo, chorus, metal, overdrive.
Yes. So that's my entree, because what I started doing, because I didn't have a violin pickup, and I didn't know that I could stick this thing in my violin. So I had this mandolin that I would mess around with, and the cool thing about it was battery powered. So you could clip it on your belt and just walk around with, those little wire headphones with the fuzzy things. Probably people out there haven't even seen things like this unless you've watched Stranger Things, and then it would be the headphones that the kids are wearing in Stranger Things is what it looks like. But you've got these earphones on and you're going into this world. So I started getting into that. I had heard Jean-Luc Ponty at that point. My dad had been getting me Ponty records, so I must have been connecting something about that, although I wasn't listening a lot to that at the time. But eventually, that's what ended up happening. I started sort of collecting these weird sounding effects, borrowing them from the store, and mostly playing guitar with them. And finally got, a crappy violin pickup that I could start doing the same stuff on the violin. Mm-hmm. And I guess it all happened pretty fast when it happened, because there wasn't really a lot of time before I went to college where I was developing this stuff. I think that when I went to Chicago, I was very much at the beginning of my journey with all that. But I liked to make the violin sound like a guitar. I was not aware yet of all the violinists that had come before me that had done this. Again, because there was no internet. So
you were like, whoa, I've discovered everything.
Yes, exactly. It was very, very easy back then to think that you were the only person in the world that had ever done this. And there's something good about that, because there's definitely a lot of bad about that, because you might not have that same sort of competitive drive in a certain way, but you also get a deeper relationship with what you're finding because you're moving more slowly through it. That's my take on it. Mm-hmm. But so I think by the time I was at school and was going to Phish shows, well, at that time, and when I met Drew Hitz, I actually had a band, because I started with some friends. We sort of co-led a band a little bit in high school. I don't know if we ever played more than about 2 gigs, but where I just played guitar. And I honestly wasn't even really sure if I just wanted to play guitar, even though I was actually going to school to get a violin degree. But I was secretly, I was playing a lot of guitar at the time. And
is there a lot that is applicable from learning how to play guitar to learning how to play violin, or is
absolutely
it very different?
Yes. No, I mean, every violin player should play the guitar. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that every guitar player should play the violin. I don't know if that's really going to help you, but for a violin player, well, the most legendary violin player of all time, Niccolo Paganini, was a very, very good guitar player and mandolin player. In fact, famous composers wrote him mandolin solos, and he composed a lot of stuff for guitar as well. It's something about having an instrument that has frets, that has a certain kind of visual map, and where you don't have to sweat the intonation. That's a big thing with the violin. The intonation is difficult enough that it takes a long time to start moving around sure-footedly, whereas on the
Right.
guitar you do it right away. So I think that it's great as a violin player to play any sort of a fretted stringed instrument so that you can start experiencing the freedom of moving around your instrument.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So yeah. So I was watching Trey shred and play, and I had listened to all the guitar players that I had listened to at the time, and I was really drawn to the way that he built solos. He was playing differently.
Tension building. Yeah.
That's
something I've found, at least in my experience playing music. It's not easy to do really, really well. And that was something that, like, early 90s Phish that was just so exceptional at these just really, really long tension builds, and then just that explosive like peak when they get there. So yeah, that must have been mind blowing to see in person.
It was mind blowing to experience it, to see it, to hear it at full volume. And when I experienced that, I thought, this is what I want to do. There's some people that do that in jazz in different ways, and it happens in classical. It happens in everything. It happens in all of the best music. It's not something that's so, at the time, that I was seeing a lot of happening in rock bands. You're sort of used to just sort of the hot flash guitar solo, more similar to watching, I don't know, TikTok or Instagram guitar videos where everybody's trying to pack everything that they can into the first 5 seconds of what you see. Was sort of the format of a lot of guitar solos, except for obviously Jimi Hendrix, Band of Gypsies, Machine Gun, probably one of my favorite of all time. A lot of the long form Frank Zappa solos too, like Inca Roads.
Yeah.
But the way that Trey was using dissonance and also that super sustain on the guitar, build up that expectation and to keep you in that place of tension, I loved it. I loved it. So I was hooked. It's
very cool. Now I'm curious, that tension building and that influence from Phish, at least when you're on stage with Snarky Puppy and Michael looks over at you for like a What About Me solo or a Lingus solo or something like that, is there a different way you approach a really open-ended solo like that versus, say, the ending of Chonks, which is more just like a straightforward rock solo?
Yes, very
much. I bring that specific example because I was listening to a version of Chonks this morning where you took the outro solo, and it was interesting to hear how you approached. It was the more extended version with like the drum break and everything versus just like the album length version. So I'm just curious to hear how you approach those really long form open-ended ones like Lingus and What About Me.
Yeah, it's a totally different way of improvising. One of my favorite things about playing in Snarky Puppy is the total improvisational quality of what's going on stage and between us. So there's some things maybe that some people know, some people don't know about Snarky. Is that number one, there is no music. There's no there's no sheet music for any of this. There's no charts. So everyone learns everything from a sequence, or however the person who writes the song is going to present that to the band, which is usually a sequence, usually something in Logic or something like that. So in that way, also it's not sequenced out so that the instrument's sounds are really specific. It's usually just a very generic sound of, it could be anything. So everybody has to learn everything.
Yeah.
Before. So in that way, this is great because then things can be traded around, including solo sections and everything else, written parts, harmony parts. That's one thing. So the other thing is, as far as solos go, there are no assigned solos. Nobody always takes the same solo. I mean, usually Justin takes the solo at the end of, blanking on.
Usually the drum solos are usually the drum solos.
The drum solos, yeah. They'll. I mean, whoever's playing drums is going to play the drum solo.
Yeah.
But Mike could even throw that to the percussionist.
Right.
And anyway, everybody has to be on call for for anything that could happen at any moment. So
how many seconds of warning do you usually get before?
You get 0 seconds. You get and that's the. I think
is it like as the solo section approaches, like everybody kind of tenses up and looks at Mike to see who he's gonna give the nod to?
Totally. That's 100% it. And if we're playing the same song the next night, which sometimes we do, but the repertoire is so vast now that there's a lot of not repeating stuff. But for sure, if you played a solo on Lingus the night before, you're definitely not. I mean, you might not play another solo for the rest of the tour on Lingus. So every time one of these things rolls around, one of the longer form solos, it's kind of a special moment. And Mike is just really into letting everybody go in whatever direction you want to go.
Yeah.
The more surprising, the more you can surprise the band, the more you can surprise your bandmates, the more fun everybody has.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is listening to something like What About Me, where whoever's soloing will like hit on a cool theme or a cool riff or whatever. And then when the band comes back on stage, instead of just going right back into the song, they kind of like play around or jam on whatever theme the soloist has latched onto for a minute or two, which is really cool. There's a What About Me from September 2019 in Charlotte where Justin has the solo. And you guys just get into a really cool groove on that one, which is one of my favorite versions of the song.
Yeah. Sometimes those grooves that Mike and everybody will lock into, or that the rhythm section might be a reference.
Yeah.
Something like a Roy Hargrove tune, or sometimes that happens, and it can be kind of obscure. It can be more overt, but there's always a lot of smiling and eye contact in that. And then, sometimes it just stays there. Mike is the one that is the decider of how long that's going to happen. But that's always fun.
Yeah. So sorry, back to, my original question before we tangented a little bit. When he, looks to you, say, let's talk about What About Me first. When he looks to you for What About Me, what are some kind of things that immediately flip through your mind that you immediately consider for what you're about to do?
Well, What About Me, really any of the really long form moments is really about pacing.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, the first thing that I'm going to think about myself is listen to what's going on. Let the air clear, let space happen.
Yeah.
Use the space, play space.
Right. I guess it's about where whoever's on drums also goes when the solo section begins.
Yeah. The relationship to the drums is a little bit different. Well, I mean, usually in What About Me, the drum beat stays really driving. Although again, it really you never really know what
it could change.
It could change, but that happens a lot. So there's kind of a even more tension coming from the horn player, guitar player, violin player, or whatever, and sort of watching a train fly by and deciding how you're gonna jump on to that train. Are you gonna jump on in slow motion? Are you gonna how are you gonna do that?
Right.
That's one thing. Another thing that all of especially the guitar players and obviously the keyboard players, although it could be dictated by which keyboard they're playing. I'll just say for me and the guitar players, and also sometimes the Maz who plays effects on his trumpet, or Chris who's playing his saxophone with effects.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about soundscape. What effects are you using? What effects have you used? Part of the thing for me, I don't like to same sound too much because it's a really big band. So you're generally getting 1 or 2 solos per show.
Yeah.
And it's something where when I'm playing in my own band, I'm taking a solo on every song. I might settle into a certain sound.
Yeah.
Whereas in Snarky, it's more of
you make it count when you get the spot.
Yeah, exactly. But then also when it comes to the long solos, you have the option. You've got the option of either creating a soundscape, going in and playing that soundscape and improvising with it in your instrument, or you can add things in.
Right.
So it's always fun to, at a climactic moment, to engage the whammy pedal or go with the ring modulator or make the delay go
Crazy.
insane. Yeah. All of that stuff. Again, the idea being a lesson early on taken from Trey and great musicians that are great at this, in ways of creating sonic tension, ways of so effects are great for creating different kinds of dissonance. You can always create tonal dissonance with your note choices and rhythmic dissonance with how you're playing against the rhythm. The thing that I love about effects is that you can create textural dissonance on top of it.
That first solo section of What About Me always feels like it's just one like long tension build until the band drops back into the song, and then it's like a release, and then you're off like shredding for the rest of it. Now for Lingus, which is honestly a very different kind of open solo than What About Me. Also the chord progression that it's over is very much like a blank slate. When you get nodded for that, how do you approach it differently than What About Me?
When I think about What About Me, I think just totally open, more experimental, and also it's not really it's kind of a double solo. What About Me, because it's really everybody drops out but you and the drum, so it's really a duet solo. So that's kind of the main difference, and just getting a little bit weirder maybe with that. Right. When I play Lingus, I'm just thinking fusing out, man. I mean, really, it's E minor modal vamp, which is just so much fun. Yeah. And with that, start with Lingus, I think that you start to get a little bit more rhythm section interaction as the solo goes on. I mean, I guess you do in What About Me too, to a certain extent, but that's a good question. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't just flip that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll do that on this tour. Maybe I'll if I get to play a solo on What About Me, maybe I'll fuse it out more and think John McLaughlin and Billy Cobham, and go full on ring modulator craziness, and maybe Lingus gets super weird. I don't know. That's part of joy of the improvisation.
Right. Is there times where you'll be improvising with them and you call to specific Phish-y themes, or like I don't know how many other guys in the band are into Phish at all. I know a couple of them have played with Jazz's Phish or acts like that, but I'm curious how much influence a band like Phish has on a band like Snarky Puppy, because there are a lot of parallels, at least for me as a listener, in terms of just the we're going to get on stage and anything can happen. That's part of why I love discovering different Snarky Puppy shows, because there's so many different versions of each song and so many different different intros to certain songs. And I discover a version of What About Me where Justin plays like a 2-minute long Rhodes intro, and I'm like, whoa, never heard that before. So cool. Or like a Lingus with a really cool like vocoder solo from Sean that I hadn't heard anything like before. The endless possibilities. Like, is there a lot of influence there?
I think that the way that influences come out with this band, everything is cooking, So every experience that you've had hearing live music, everything that you've ever listened to that's moved you is going into that. So is that influence there? Absolutely. For me and for anybody else that has gotten into that. There's also connections that get made, for instance. So if you experience that kind of tension building thing going on in a jam from a mid-90s show, Trey, and you continue to expand things that you're listening to, you're going to hear Miles Davis doing that in the 70s.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden things start to mingle, and then you start to connect that with the way that Coltrane comes in on his Afro Blue solo from the Afro Blue Impressions record. with a non-dissonant note, but the way that he plays it, creating that kind of expectation and tension. And all of those things just become part of what's going on. If you're improvising at a professional level, one would hope that you're not consciously doing anything.
Yeah. It's just kind of your fingers are moving how they're moving.
You're listening.
Yeah.
So all of your practicing, all of your listening to records and then learning stuff and practicing them and learning how to play them on your instrument and coming up with little exercises and all of that is left in the practice room. And then what it is it's a conversation, because obviously it's a big drag to have a conversation with another person that's already decided what they're going to say to you.
Right.
Terrible, terrible feeling. And that can happen in music in the same way when people play licks on you and stuff like that. Like, man, there's nothing, in a certain way, it's saying nothing that you're doing right now is moving the needle because I have this agenda and I'm going to get this off. That's my opinion about improvised music. Now, that's totally different. I love it when Eddie Van Halen does that because that's the way that the music is structured to do that. So yeah, that's I guess a little bit different. Solo crafting of something like that versus jamming, improvising in a more jam sense, a jazz sense, where the music is a conversation.
Yeah, got it. Very cool. One more on the stage with Snarky Puppy question. I know sometimes on the violin you're playing what the horns are playing, and sometimes you're playing what the guitar is playing. Does that change on a show-to-show basis, like depending on how many of the horns players are on tour, how many guitars there are? How do you just kind of, I'm feeling the guitar melody today, so I'm going to play guitar? Like, what goes into that decision process, and is it something that you discuss with the other band members before the show, or it just kind of happens as it happens?
Great question. Then the answer is for that stuff, for the actual melodic written parts of the song before the improvisation, yes, we do talk about that. And yes, if they're down to only 2 horns instead of having 3, and they really need this harmony part on this song, and we know that we're going to probably play it, then I'll get with the horn players backstage. And if I don't already know that harmony part, they show it to me, or I remember it. And yeah, if there's a song that has there's a couple of songs that have double lines with the guitars, and when I'm not playing with them, a lot of times one of the keyboards is doubling with the guitar. But then when I come on tour, the keyboard player gets a different part. Then they have to figure out what they're doing. Are they laying out? Are they playing something else? And then me and the guitar player work out which one of those parts. Am I playing the melody or am I playing the harmony? And so we're always
shifting.
We're always practicing, always.
Yeah.
Thank God we have our sound checks last about 5 minutes. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours for the band to be set up, all the technical stuff, especially all the drums and percussion. But the actual playing,
that's funny,
is super. Mike League is the shortest sound checking person of all time, and sound checks are never used for rehearsing. If they're
it's to just check levels of things.
It's to check everybody's on stage mix and the outside house mix at the same time. So first thing that we check is what about me, from the very very start into the melodies,
always,
and then we cut it always. And then the second thing we do is 5/4 section and kite. Or maybe the whole thing's in, I don't know. There's like a certain chorus part. We do that. We don't even play the whole thing. We probably play it for 15, 20 seconds max each. And then everybody goes down the line. I think Mike learned this because there's so many people on stage. And if you play a whole bunch and then you've got to ask everybody, okay, what do you need more of? What do you need less of? It takes too much time. So the time is devoted to everybody getting their sound right. And then we go backstage, and then we're like, oh shit, man. Oh God. Okay. We're playing that song. I haven't played that since last year. Okay. So who's playing that part? And then, then we have a few hours to get it together, and, then we're off into the hallways with the earphones, shedding and figuring it out. And
So is there ever a time where there's full band rehearsal, or is it just you show up and you have, like, are you practicing material right now to be ready for the upcoming tour because you show up on the first date and it's just like, all right, you're on stage and going?
That's it. You got to show up. It's really the only band it's the only band I've ever played in that has no charts.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only band I've ever played in that has this much repertoire and no charts.
Right.
And
I guess a repertoire this complex with no charts.
Yeah. So, but it's great because the onus is on all the musicians, and there's no way that any of us would ever show up. I mean, first of all, nobody ever feels 100% prepared when they show up.
Right.
That's something that we all have a bit of a support group type thing going on the first few shows, and until we start to kind of settle into, okay, we're kind of concentrating on these 15 songs right now, and maybe we'll add one in. Mike will let us know. He'll update us. He sent an email the other day, just kind of getting us all ready to think about this, that said, these are the songs that I want to do for these upcoming tours. Right.
So, like, these are the songs that we maybe haven't played in a few years that we're going to bring back a little bit. Got it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's the new record. So that's kind of intense because there's
16 songs. Yeah.
A lot of songs on that. Yeah. And then the record before it. Yeah. So all the other records. So, and then as we get into it, we'll start to whittle it down, and there'll be a smaller pool that'll be in circulation. But yeah, I mean, everybody's always shedding a little bit, and if you're not shedding the stuff that you're trying to remember more clearly, you're shedding the stuff that you wish you'd played a little bit better in the last show, or kind of doing that thing. But it's great. It's intense, really intense, but it's a joy. It's a pleasure. I've tried to recreate it sometimes with other projects of my own, and I found out just how difficult it is to do that, and how special it is to have that many people agreeing to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's not what usually jazz musicians, improvising musicians, they want the book, they want the set list, they want to know what songs they're soloing on.
Right. So you can prepare in advance.
So that you can prepare and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's really cool. Then before we wrap up, I do want to ask about the new album, Empire Central, that's coming out just next week. When this is coming out, it'll be this week, which is very exciting. I can't wait to hear it. The first 3 singles have been amazing. I want to highlight your solo on Belmont, which was really cool to hear, because a lot of time, as we've talked about, you use effects a lot. And that one, at least to my ears, it only sounded like you had some delay and maybe reverb on it, but it was just really like a beautiful, beautiful violin solo, and no problem. This is your first time doing a live, with an audience record with Snarky Puppy in a long time. No, I was gonna say in a long time. The band hasn't done one since We Like It Here, but you were on hiatus from them then.
Right? But let's see, the ones that, so Tell Your Friends, that was the first live one.
Yeah.
And then also Ground Up, that one was live. So actually I was used to recording live in that way.
Yeah.
Until we did Culture Vulture.
Yeah.
That was actually the first time, because then the studio stuff early on, right when I first got into the band, that was on Bring Us the Bright. And that was something where the record they were mostly recording it down in Texas at one place, but then I came in to lead a string quartet and some string parts in that. Ooh. And then overdubbed solos and things like that.
Right.
But anyway, yes. So what did we do for Empire Central? We have never worked this hard on a record. It was so intense. Mm-hmm. We rehearsed / learned the songs for a week straight of rehearsals that started in the morning and went until we were done. There was not really any even sort of a cutoff time. Mm-hmm. It was so intense. And I mean, people were still finishing songs at that point.
Yeah.
Or we were still pulling things apart and putting them back together and everything like that. And then the really cool thing was we had never done this many shows. All of the live, well, I mean, when I'm thinking about Tell Your Friends and Ground Up, I was like 2 sets of this.
And then you had to hope that those were album worthy sets.
Yeah, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
With this, they actually sold tickets. Of course, it was this whole thing of not playing during the pandemic and.
Right. It was supposed to be, I remember it was supposed to be like last fall, but then it was postponed and then.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, and people were getting COVID in the middle of the recording. And I mean, we were all testing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just that whole thing that everybody that's dealt with professional life during the pandemic, I think everybody sort of just went through the same thing.
Yeah.
Except that you're working a job, kind of an office job, and one person in your office gets sick, the whole thing doesn't fall apart.
Yeah.
Whereas with the performing arts, the bass player gets sick and they can't be there. You're just, you're in bad shape.
Yeah.
So, we were on high alert. Like one of the interns got COVID, and this poor kid had come all the way from Spain and basically spent a week and a half in a hotel room in Dallas, not being able to see anyone, and then just had to fly home. Really, really shitty.
Yeah.
But
you guys made it through.
We made it through miraculously, and then they did all of these. I mean, I don't even remember how many concerts we did, but we played a lot. Now where there are so many songs, we couldn't play all the songs every night. So
right.
that was needed because we would usually move through a few days of getting all the different versions of a particular tune, and then create more shows. But it was also tricky because there were tickets sold for the shows. Mm-hmm. So Mike had to program it so that it was still a good show.
Right. Like craft it like a concert set list so it flows well.
Yeah. So you can't have all the sleepy songs just in for 3 nights in a row. Right. Yeah, exactly. In one set. So
it must have been cool for you guys too, though. You're not playing the same set 10 times looking for the right songs for the album. You're playing the songs in different orders. You're not doing the same song every time.
Yeah, very true. We didn't know what was ultimately going to even end up on the record.
Right, whether all 16 were going to.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that element that was just really special. The folks at Deep Ellum Art Company are unbelievable. I love those people. The whole thing, the way that it came together, the way that Ground Up put this together, it was, I don't know. I mean, the ante was upped so much for this record. And to be quite honest, so I have the record sitting on my computer. I've got the masters.
Ooh.
I haven't listened to it yet. I listened to what I had to listen to for the tour in the spring and summer.
Yeah.
But I haven't, I don't know. I don't, some musicians love to listen to their stuff all the time. They put on their music when their friends come over. I'm one of the opposite. I don't even, if I hear something that I'm even on at all, I just immediately go in the other room or I turn it off if I can. But we're about to, on Monday, here's another super amazing thing. So the whole thing is shot and directed by this incredible filmmaker in Spain, Jep Jorba, and just this like giant crew. Plus Andy LaViolette was, Andy LaViolette was there, but he just came to hang out because he's got another gig. He was the guy that used to do all of our video stuff. So
got it.
There were some people from past productions, but in a way, this was kind of a new group of people. There's a big Spanish contingent going on now because Mike lives in Spain, and all the interns were from Spain, and the film director and all of that. So we had Nick Hard doing the engineering, and then also Fab Dupont was involved as well. And I don't think any of us really knew what was going on, but we found out after the fact that, not only is this coming out as the record and as the full film of everything, but also there's going to be a version of it that's mixed in the new Dolby Atmos, whatever.
Yeah, like really insane quality sound.
The beyond thing of full 360 immersive sound. And so this Monday, they're doing one in LA. It might have already even happened, or it might be happening tonight.
I think it's the end of this.
Oh, that's maybe? Right. They did one at Deep Ellum, or they're doing one, and then they're doing one in LA, and then I'll be at the one in New York on Monday, and I get to go with my wife and kids, and Nick is going to be there, and I think Chris Bullock will be there, and whoever is still left in the New York area,
right,
that hasn't moved off, and I'm going to finally
listen to the whole album,
listen and see the whole thing in a room full of people and friends, and I'm really excited because
that's awesome.
I just know that coming away from that experience, I thought, wow, so it's one thing to come back during the pandemic, or as the pandemic is kind of winding down, and to do this next record, which had, as you said, had been postponed, and all of everyone's plans just sort of getting totally screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be one thing just to come back and just do another record, but I think that all of us talked a lot about and agreed after the fact that it was sort of like Mike upped the ante at least 3 times. Everything about it, the production, the writing, the collaboration, the whole recording and the filming thing. I mean, everything was up at least 3 levels. I mean, I don't even know where we go from here, honestly, at this point. I mean, I don't even know. So I'm excited for people to hear this. It's also always when you play in a band that has been playing for a while and people start to have really their favorite stuff, and this is something that all Phish fans can relate to.
Yeah.
Being in the band, you want to reach people, and you want people to connect emotionally and viscerally with the performances and to enjoy it. That's you're there to share that communication, but you also don't want to just keep doing the same stuff.
Yeah, like play Lingus.
Right, exactly. And so that there's always going to be a certain element of every time you do something new, if it really is new, you're going to leave some people behind, and then some people are going to come along, and then you might get some new people.
Right.
You don't ever want to leave anybody behind, but that happens. People just like, fuck it. I don't want to listen to anything after, for Snarky Puppy, I don't want to listen to anything except for the way that it sounded on We Like It Here.
Yeah.
Or I don't want to listen to anything, whatever. It is also interesting how, as you move away from creating the new material and you keep playing it and people hear it,
it expands in different ways.
It expands in different ways, and also people jump back on. So, that's something that happened with Immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, big time. Listening to shows from the spring versus the fall, the material, changes so much.
It changed a lot. And what we also noticed from the stage and as the band and talking to people in the audience after the shows is that a lot of people that really did not want to hear any of that new stuff started to it's when people start to really identify and like your new stuff. It's a good feeling. So it must have been a really good feeling for Trey and everybody in the band to get past, oh, we have to do this all the time, or we're going to have to just be playing Gamehenge for the rest of our lives. Otherwise the hardcore fans aren't going to connect. But then all of a sudden, when a new song, but maybe it came out 2 years ago, but to some people it's still new, finally starts to be the thing that people want to hear.
Right.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah. That was a really, really great way to tie it back to Phish. That was impressive. I wasn't sure if we were going to land back there. But Zach, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been such an honor and a pleasure talking to you about improvisation and Snarky Puppy and Phish and everything. So I hope this upcoming Europe tour is amazing. I look forward to hopefully hearing some recordings from it soon. And if you're listening, don't miss Empire Central, Snarky Puppy's new album, out September 30th. Zach, do you have anything outside of Snarky Puppy coming out anytime soon? I know you have a new album that came out this year.
Yeah. If folks haven't checked it out, check out my strangely titled album, Dirty Minds. Just came out in June. So to me, it's still new. Mm-hmm. And this is definitely this is the very, very electric, very effect-laden, rocked-out album that I was never putting out on my own that I finally did. And it's got a couple of Snarky Puppy cats in there, Mark Lettieri on guitar, Justin Stanton on keys, and he plays some trumpet on a tune. And also Chris Bullock jumps in on some flute. And then it also has the legendary drummer Eric Harland and the amazing bass player Jonathan Marin from Groove Collective and various other things, and some other really cool guests. So yeah, people want to hear some jazz rock violin, check out Dirty Minds. That's out on Ground Up, and you can find it in all those places.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Zach. Hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.